Welcome to The Story. I'm Evan Watson in for Pat Doris this week. Tonight, let's talk about tolling. Here at The Story, it's a topic we've covered before and one that generates a lot of comments from you all. Planned tolling for I-5 and I-205 is designed to reduce congestion in the Portland metro and add a much-needed stream of revenue for ODOT. But one of the huge concerns we hear from you is what happens when people ditch the interstate to avoid tolls and end up clogging community roads. Our deep dive into that question is tonight's big story. The name for what we're talking about is toll diversion, a change in traveler behavior in response to pricing or tolls. Avoiding the interstate to drive on local roads isn't the only knock-on effect, but it is a big one. Taking public transit or carpooling could be other options. But ODOT says they have a plan for toll diversion, and they went to state lawmakers on Friday to explain. The presentation, though, left representatives and myself wanting more. Here's a consultant for ODOT, Matthew Woodhouse, explaining what usually happens after tolls are implemented.
Traffic will change and restabilize over time. It's just like the first week of school. It'll take some time for people to evaluate their travel options and choices and determine which is best for them. And the value of a toll depends on the anticipated travel time and many other factors. Some people may make decisions on a trip-by-trip basis. When they're in a hurry, their time is more valuable. They're more likely to take the interstate and pay the toll because they want a reliable trip. And when they have more flexibility to leave earlier or arrive later, it may be that they choose to take the longer route, which is free. But support for tolling tends to grow over time as people see the benefit of paying a toll for a quicker and more reliable trip. That you know that when you're getting on the highway at 5 p.m., you're going to be able to continue at travel highway speeds and not get stuck in congestion.
Right now, ODOT is looking at adding tolls on I-205 at the Abernethy Bridge and later on I-5 as part of a regional project. Tolling there would likely start about 2 years from now. The plan is to use different toll pricing at different times of the day to reduce congestion, encouraging people to drive at off-peak hours. ODOT explained that with other toll projects, traffic dropped off significantly when tolling started, but slowly increased again in the years to follow. Republican Senator Lynn Findley asked about that.
So what you're saying is that diversion will be a short-lived problem. We'll divert all this traffic out of these side streets and impact all those, but they'll get tired of that and pay the toll and come back. Am I oversimplifying that? But that's what it seems like I hear you say.
Rerouting is one of the many potential responses to pricing in terms of toll diversion. It could be that people shift their time. They start going to work 30 minutes earlier, or they leave work half an hour later. So ultimately, what the objective of variable pricing is to redistribute that traffic.
Woodhouse and ODOT used data from Hampton Roads, Virginia as an example. After tolling bridges and tunnels about a decade ago in Hampton Roads, they showed how weekday traffic dropped by 20%. Here's Senator Findley again on that decrease.
Where did the people go? Where did the cars really drop by the total daily trips at those 5 bridges or tunnels?
Mr. Chair, Senator Findley, yes, there was some reduction. And we can't say on an individual basis what happened to those trips. They left either the Midtown or downtown tunnel. They may have used those other alternative routes, or they may have combined their trips or made changes.
To answer that, luckily for you, here is where I come in. Before moving here 2 years ago to Portland, I lived in Hampton Roads, Virginia, reporting in Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Portsmouth, right where these tolls were added. And I can tell you what happened. A lot of people just stopped taking the toll routes altogether. Yes, that meant more traffic on local roads, and it also meant a big economic hit for Portsmouth, the area most isolated by the tolls. Why go to a restaurant in Portsmouth and pay a toll to get there when you can stay closer to home or go somewhere else? We could see similar effects here, and you don't have to take my word for it. I can prove it to you. Professors at Old Dominion University in Norfolk have studied the toll impact in Hampton Roads for years, publishing multiple reports. In 2019, 47% of people surveyed said they avoided visiting a business in a neighboring city due to tolls on bridges or tunnels. And 39% of people, the yellow bar here, said they took a different route to work or school, local roads, and many more said they changed their schedule or changed where they want to live or work because of tolls. In short, yes, a lot of people reroute and change their driving behavior to avoid tolls, and that has lasting effects. And I'm not the only one with thoughts on the tolls in Hampton Roads. Here's Oregon Democrat Representative Anessa Hartman, who represents a district that includes Oregon City, the area where some of Oregon's new tolls will go.
I just want to say hi, Mom, because she's watching. And the only reason why I say that is because she lives in Norfolk. She lives in Virginia Beach. And so she's sitting here texting me things that I can't say out loud about tolls, right? Okay, this probably doesn't apply to the decorum of this committee, but that traffic still really has words after that. It's not great. So I just had to share that piece.
Yeah. So what's ODOT going to do about this? They plan to track the current usage of local roads around these tolling spots, then compare that to when the tolls are added and make changes accordingly. That can mean a new traffic signal, a turn lane, reducing the toll price, and other examples. Woodhouse said it would depend on how bad the problem is. The lawmakers asked ODOT for more hard data on the alternative routes that will be most used when these tolls are added.
What is the capacity of those streets? That's the dive I get to get my knees wet. I mean, I would really like to know.
You're spot on, and some of those we're answering some of those questions and providing them to you in writing. We'll get a little bit more specific on some of those, how many trips, current capacity, what's happening, what's going to happen on those local trips. We do have that data, Senator. We'll make sure that gets distributed to the committee.
So more to come here. One last thing. The pricing structure really matters. More people will use toll roads if they're cheap, and if they're more expensive, they'll find another way. And I'll note here that there will be a program to reduce costs for lower income residents. That is common in situations like this. But for the Midtown Tunnel in Virginia, the initial toll rate in 2014 was $1.84 per car at peak times. And the governor temporarily bought that down to $1 to encourage people to still take the highway. Just 10 years later, that toll rate has now increased to $3.06 per trip. It goes up every year. I would love to hear your thoughts on this tolling diversion plan from ODOT. What's going through your mind? Let us know. Send an email to thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail 503-226-5090. Oregon's legislature has been in session for just over a week now, but some recent moves by Republican lawmakers have already upset some at the Capitol and beyond. One new lawmaker posted a homophobic blog post on his campaign website. Another said that only Christians are fit to hold public office, and another introduced a bill that would ban transgender girls from playing sports at school. Let's start with the first one, a blog post published by Representative Dwight Younker from Grants Pass. Younker was appointed to fill the seat of Representative Lily Morgan after she resigned to take another job. He's also a city councilor in Grants Pass. His blog post titled "No to Gay Pride Month" talks about how he was upset that the Grants Pass mayor read a proclamation in support of Pride Month this past summer. He wrote, "I stand on biblical truths and opposed to the transgender movement. It is shocking that any adult would endorse this child abuse." He goes on to say that transgender kids should not get gender-affirming health care or play on sports teams that align with their gender, to falsely claim that drag queens are pedophiles, and to equate LGBTQ people with pedophiles, a false homophobic claim that's been used for decades. We reached out to Representative Younker. He has not responded. Next, Republican Representative E. Werner Reschke, who represents southern Deschutes and eastern Klamath County. He appeared on a Facebook live stream last month and claimed that non-Christians should not serve in government.
You don't want a materialist. You don't want an atheist. You don't want a Muslim. You want somebody who understands what truth is and understands the nature of man, the nature of government, and the nature of God. Yeah. If you don't understand those things, you're going to get things wrong. And in Oregon, that's a classic example. We have a lot of people who are godless, unfortunately, leading the way, and it's the blind leading the blind.
We reached out to Representative Reschke. He also did not respond. Now let's go to one last thing, a bill introduced by Republican Representative Christine Goodwin, who represents the Canyonville area in Southern Oregon. House Bill 4054, she says, would ban, quote, biological males from competing in female sports. She wrote, "The modern left expects us to go along with the false reality that a man who thinks he's a woman has no biological advantage over women. Allowing boys to compete in physical sports with women is both dangerous and wrong, and the ideology behind it is fundamentally anti-woman." So far, the bill has not been scheduled for any hearing. There are 37 Republicans serving in the Oregon legislature this year, and these examples come from only 3 of them. So are they more extreme outliers, or is this a reflection of the Republican Party in Oregon, or maybe across the country? We took that question to political science professor Jim Moore at Pacific University.
It is not an outlier situation. What they are doing is they are specifically proposing bills that are on the books in other states that have been put on the books in the past few years, or floating ideas that are being actively talked about in other states. So in effect, it's the nationalization of these social conservative issues that's coming to Oregon, not anything that's popping up from Oregon per se.
Moore says that things like bills barring trans kids from sports are usually made-to-order bills that come up in state governments all around the country.
I would bet that if we looked at the proposals, they're exact copies of what's been in other states. There are groups, one pretty famous one that works with conservatives, that actually float out legislation. Here's legislation you can take to your state to put in the system word for word. And so it's identical laws in other states. So that's what I would bet is happening here.
But in a state like Oregon, anti-trans bills, for instance, are doomed to fail. So why even make this effort? Moore says it has to do with drumming up the Republican voters in Oregon, especially during an election year.
Things like this, because they're going to fail, you can use in the 2024 election to try to drive turnout. Remember, Donald Trump is going to lose in Oregon. There's just no question about that. But can there be a Republican turnout so the Republicans keep the congressional district number 5 with Ori Chavez de Reamer? They get enough votes that they can flip congressional district number 6, where Andre Salinas is going to face Mike Erickson. So there's a lot of movement here that will generate support if it lasts this long.
We reached out to the leader of Oregon's House Republicans, Representative Jeff Helfrich. He also did not respond. Let us know what you think of these moves by Oregon Republicans and whether they represent the party as a whole, or if you think they represent your views, whether they are your elected official or not. Email us at thestory@kgw.com or leave a voicemail 503-226-5090. Up next on The Story, U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg toured the aging I-5 bridge today. What he had to say about the potential for more federal funding. Plus, later on, our Shrinking Snowpack series continues. And tonight, we're focused on the Cascades. Outdoor recreation businesses are being forced to adapt, and the future outlook is less than ideal. All that and more when The Story returns.
Is this where you want me? It's sitting on the floor if you want to bump it up. Thank you. It's perfect. Thank you.
How did the airport look to you yesterday?
It's beautiful. I mean, it's just the fact that there is so much space and so much natural light, I think is just a game changer. I mean, while keeping Portland in mind, meaning the size of the city, it feels world class in a way that places like Hong Kong and Singapore and all of these great
It's not often that a member of the president's cabinet is in town, so we brought a camera to the transportation secretary's tour of the I-5 bridge today. Pete Buttigieg missed a big anniversary by just one day. One of the spans of the bridge turns 107 years old tomorrow. Buttigieg agreed with state leaders that a new bridge is needed, and it's one of the many reasons that his department has approved $600 million so far to make it happen.
The $600 million is a vote of confidence in the cooperation that is happening on both sides of the river. This is one of the handful that I will be tracking and that are going to get nationwide attention because of just how big, how complex, and how important it is.
The project right now is expected to be wrapped up around the time the bridge is 114, 115 years old. How imperative is it to work efficiently to get this new bridge going?
You know, this is an ambitious project with an ambitious timeline, and it is going to take a lot of work to stay on that timeline. Part of what makes that possible is funding.
Before his visit to the bridge today, David MCO sat down one-on-one for an exclusive interview with the Transportation Secretary at PDX. David joins us now. It was a pretty wide-ranging interview, right, David?
You know, I pushed him on the funding, didn't get anywhere with that. 20 minutes or so to talk about Boeing, the door plug blowout, making flying better for travelers. Wouldn't that be great? And once we got through most of the harder hitting questions, we'll call them that, I had just about a minute left. I was looking for some personal insight, a moment of reflection, and given the Secretary's position, perhaps some perspective on where we are as a country in 2024. So here's what I decided to ask, and how the Secretary answered. If you could go back and give your 16 or 17-year-old self some advice, what would it be?
You know, my 16-year-old self was hoping to be an airline pilot, and life worked in a different way, but I guess I could tell my 16-year-old self that I was going to wind up working in transportation and aviation after all, just in a different way. You know, it's the other thing I guess I'd want a young self to know, since at the time I was wrestling with my sexuality and whether that would prevent me from ever getting to serve, whether as a military officer or anything like the job I have now, was that things change in this country.
Yeah. What advice would you have for LGBTQ plus young people and teens who may see you as a role model?
Well, most importantly, that you're not alone, that I'm rooting for you, that whatever nasty politics is taking place right now, trying to take advantage of some of the most vulnerable people in the country, which is LGBTQ plus youth, that you've got a lot of people in your corner, including the President of the United States, people like me, and a lot of people who want you to succeed. It hasn't been easy, and the last couple of years have seen, unfortunately, some really cynical actions taken for political advantage at the expense of this community. But at the end of the day, the existence of my family is living proof of how much can change in a short amount of time in this country. And we're going to keep pushing until everybody knows that they can have that sense of belonging and safety that they deserve.
By the way, you can watch my full interview with Pete Buttigieg. It's up right now on our KGW YouTube channel. If you missed it, by the way, check out our digital producer, Anthony Masuke's sneak peek tour inside the soon-to-be open brand new main terminal at PDX. It is definitely a showstopper. Evan?
Just brilliant. Thank you, David.
You bet.
Up next on The Story, part 2 of our week-long series focused on the shrinking snowpack in the Pacific Northwest. Tonight, we take a look at the Cascades and how new research into the recent deadly heat dome event revealed a surprising new perspective for experts. Details when The Story returns. Our week-long series on the Pacific Northwest snowpack continues tonight. In some areas, the mountain snowpack is a fraction of what it should be right now, and the El Nino weather pattern could sustain drought conditions well into the spring and summer. All this week, our Environment Northwest team is looking at the shrinking snowpack and the impacts on Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. Tonight, meteorologist Leah Pizzetti shows us where things stand in the Cascades.
You hear the headlines, warmest year on record, hottest summer, and yes, those are noteworthy events, but some Northwest researchers are discovering that it's other overlooked periods that may be more significant and have a domino effect on things like snowpack moving forward.
Let's go do it.
These ski instructors are in their element.
Thank you.
In the elements.
And it was snowing outside the building earlier.
Which so far this year haven't been ideal.
We could really use some cooperation from Mother Nature.
Jim Smith's father founded ski school Snow Sports Northwest at Snoqualmie Pass in the 60s.
So it's doing the trick.
Scott Goddard was hired by his dad in the 80s.
You know, remember we're trying to put 150 kids onto a much smaller area right now.
Yep. It's condensing the area because of the lack of available runs.
In their decades here, they've seen good and bad years. They knew El Nino meant this year wouldn't be great, and it's not. The USDA shows Washington's snow in the Cascades sits around half of normal, and the Olympics sits less than a third of normal.
We're less than half of what we had last year for sure.
Now they're navigating the terrain.
It almost makes me think that we might have to move the season out.
But even the good recent years don't compare to their childhood, growing up skiing this same mountain.
We were consistently every year up here in the middle of November.
We've lost the month on either end of the season.
The timeline of that gradual melting is a subject Washington State University's PhD candidate Luke Reyes is devoting his studies to.
Every year there seems to be these new sort of extreme events and record seasons or months.
His team's newly published research initially set out to analyze the impacts of the Northwest 2021 heat dome on the snowpack, when temperatures skyrocketed into triple digits for days straight and killed hundreds in the Northwest.
People would post like before and after pictures of maybe be hiking on Mount St. Helens or Mount Rainier, and there'd be snow one day and then there was nothing there a week later.
But when they looked at the numbers, they realized something huge. The heat dome is not the reason the snow melted that year.
That was still mostly gone by the time the heat dome arrived, which suggested to us that something else might have been happening.
Weaker, less headline-worthy periods of warm temperatures chipped away at the snowpack before the heat dome arrived. Events that have doubled in frequency since the 90s.
Sometimes these short-term, really acute events can be overlooked.
That warming is having an impact here in the Northwest. Data from the EPA shows that Washington's snowpack has been decreasing significantly since the 1950s. On average, anywhere from 20 to 30%, but in some cases, as much as 50 to 60%. And projections show that due to warming temperatures, a lot of that winter precipitation will fall as rain instead of snow, further reducing the snowpack. And the snow season is shortening too. Peak snowpack usually hits on April 1st, but in recent years, that's changed. Anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks earlier now. And it's not just the snowpack, it's glaciers also. One recent study projects that all glaciers on the Olympic Peninsula will be gone by 2070, with a similar situation in the Cascades. A University of Washington report projects the snow season in the Cascades to decrease by half by the end of the 21st century, dropping from the historical 142 days of snow in the late 1900s to 87 days by the 2080s. And while these pros are navigating the decline and adjusting their teaching timeline, they're not stopping.
I haven't worked a day since I started in the ski business.
Yeah, who else can talk about this is my office right here, right?
Hoping that with every lesson taught and mountain skied, they're teaching kids to be in their element, in the elements.
We'll just keep plugging along and waking up every day and looking for that next dump,
For Environment Northwest,
All right.
I'm meteorologist Leah Pizzetti.
We will have more from our Environment Northwest team all this week looking at this shrinking snowpack. That is the end of our show tonight. Thanks for watching. The good stuff is coming your way next, and stick around for the late news at 11 o'clock. Meantime, I hope you'll join me again tomorrow night right here on This Story. Make it a great one.